Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Two Wizards and a Mic, where a couple of really old dudes talk about D&D. Okay, sexy dudes talk about D&D, and we hopefully will, make you have a better game, because that's really our goal. We do this for the fun of it, and if you love us, subscribe. Why not? Follow us. We do have an audio version of the podcast, and we also have a video version where you can see our illustrious faces. Why, hello there, Andrew. I'm Shane. Did I just say Andrew? No, I am Shane. You are Andrew. And, hi.
Hello, Shane. How are you doing?
I am back home in the town of Vancouver. I'm very
hmm
pleased. I'm still getting back up. I've been here for a couple days now, but still, I did not realize that there's a lot of time where you have to shift your brain if you've been gone, quite a while, and getting back into the swing of your, quote unquote normal life, which will include a game this coming weekend. And is there any update on the Kickstarter that you want to share?
Yes, there's the two Kickstarters. So the World of Mir, all the hardcover books are ordered. The soft cover, I finally got the cover file, so that's being ordered for the office. So that
Excellent.
should be here in a week or two. And as long as there's no issues, there's about 20, 25 soft cover orders. And then there's a few little extras for those backers, like stickers and a few PDFs that are not haven't been sent out. The Mushroom King, I'm waiting for the PDF to be finished. Should be done very soon. And then the next Kickstarter, we're looking at early November for the second adventure book.
Very cool.
And things are moving along.
I'm very excited because I know that some of the adventures that I will be embarking upon with a new party uh, is going to have some. I suspect there will be some elements from these adventures in there. I hope. Because it'll just be fun to experience them because it's been we've been waiting a while, and it's got to happen. So this week we are talking about factions in D&D. Now, what is a faction? What does that mean in the context of Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, it can mean a few different things. Usually it's not an entire kingdom or group of creatures like like all the elves. Although some people sometimes call these things factions, but usually we're talking about a smaller organization within a kingdom or culture. Its influence can vary depending on its role in the story, how connected the characters get to it. You could recruit, the players could get recruited into a faction. They could start a faction and recruit people, or they could just interact with them in the world. And as I said, they could be really important or, a minor part of the story. And there's a lot of options. We're going to look today just overall at some different kinds of factions, use some examples from our World of Mir. That should be publicly being released in I hope, about 2 weeks. And that is filled with factions for that world. And you don't need to have every single detail worked out for these factions, but you could note a few important elements. You could put them on a flashcard or just in your notebook, or some people use their laptop. So, you're going to have a name, obviously, and there's usually, in general, two choices with fantasies in terms of fantasy settings, in terms of names, whether it's a place or a faction or a creature, even. And usually the main two options are, do you choose something that's literal, that just explains what something is, or do you choose an unusual original name? For example, the Thieves Guild, right? That tells
Yeah.
you exactly what it is. You know, you could choose another faction name, like we have one in the World of Mir, a monk brotherhood called the Inner Sons, which doesn't describe literally what they are, but it is a symbolic name for them. So you choose a name. The leader, I usually note the leaders like class and race and their gender. Sometimes the magic items that they have, you could fill out a whole NPC sheet if you wanted, and sometimes their age, and so you have a leader, and sometimes there can be more than one, but many times it's one.
Right.
Sometimes yeah, council, and then you've headquarters. You've got lots of options for headquarters. Factions could be in a manor, keep, castle, fortress, dungeon, hall. Um, their locations, it could be a hidden location in a dungeon or cave, underground somewhere, potentially in a settlement, on an island in the wilderness. You have just unlimited options really. And then members, I usually put like the number. So say there's a thieves guild, I would say, oh, there's 10 rogues and there's maybe 20 guards because they'll probably have security for their headquarters. And then, but
Right.
they also have like one magic user or maybe a few fighters. If they have creatures like monsters that are part of the faction, like maybe the thieves guild have mastiffs guarding their headquarters. So that kind of thing, or maybe they've hired like some bugbears as guards for the entrance. So you could put all that kind of, you could note that. A symbol, I usually have some kind of symbol for my groups. That's always kind of fun to figure out. And then you can tell the players, oh, you see this, painted on the side of a wall or on the ground, and that can give them a hint to something, something's up. Um, as I said, a lot of factions have some kind of protection, like they hired guards. Sometimes they even have a small army. Um, Scouts, mercenaries, and mercenaries in fifth edition really are the veteran NPC that's in the monster manual. And then mounts, like do they have a lot of horses? Do they have do they have like maybe if it's an orc tribe, orc clan, maybe they have wargs that they ride. There could be, I
Right.
would include animals here too. You could put them here or with your members. And then vehicles and ships, maybe just note, oh, this group actually has a ship. That could be useful. Maybe they escape on the ship, or maybe they use it for transport. Maybe they're like a trading guild. And then the motto. I don't always have a motto for the factions, but I like once in a while throwing them in. They have a nice flavor. Um, I have one group of bandits on the continent of Mir, the Wind Riders, and their motto is "Ride like the wind." Um, and I have a monk brotherhood, an evil one, whose motto is "When the darkness falls." I think that's what it is, and because they're called the Eclipse, that's the name of their.
Right. Of course.
So it's fun sometimes to have a motto that the members will repeat to each other, and the players will pick up on that, going, "Oh, what's going on here?" Sometimes the motto will be like a code, to or you might have a different language, like the Thieves Guild might use Thieves Cant to talk to each other.
Of course.
Yeah,
And those kinds of things really will inform other game masters or dungeon masters that are, well, who are delving into the world of Mir, who actually want to. I mean, they could watch this show and find out all kinds of things, but ultimately, just it gives them a little, as I always call them, like little nuggets to say, okay, this is what they say. In the book, this could mean this, but you could make it mean whatever you want to fit your adventure, and like because you could actually have, if you had like a well fleshed out gang or a well fleshed out guild, you could in theory take that if they decide, okay, well, I don't want to play Mirror to this particular adventure, I want to play this one over here, but I really like those characters and bring them into different situations and things like that can make some unique encounters happen, which I find with like gangs and clans. There's always going to be a moment where, and I think I've mentioned this before, but there was an adventure I did a long time ago where my character was really underpowered, and I think it was a halfling, and I was given a task by some guild leader or something. Oh, you've got to do this, and I'm like, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to pull this off. But then I thought, wait a minute. So I there was a market square with like a pub or a tavern off to the side, and I walked in and I just sort of had that sort of moment of, I have money and I need you to beat up this guy. Who wants to do it? And of course, the guy running the game was like, oh, I don't know, roll some dice. Yeah, there's like 12 guys who want to help you out. All right, cool. So I completed this task that I would not have been able to complete on my own.
Mhm.
And it turned out that it was a large gang that had a bunch of connections here and there, and it took the adventure and possibilities like all kinds of ways. So that anyway, sorry, I'm just excited about gangs all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It can add so much to the story. It can be part of the quest. As you said, you could hire these people, or maybe they could hire you. Um, so here's a list of different types of factions. One is bandit clan. So these obviously would be fairly chaotic, kind of nomadic or wanderers usually. Often their leaders, a powerful warrior type, but not necessarily. I actually made a creature called the Bandit Lord, kind of an NPC basically, who's in the Monsters of the City. So that's one example of a leader you could use. And these groups are really criminals for the most part. Another group are the Bard colleges. So colleges are another kind of faction. So bards have got to learn somewhere. So there's master bards at the college. There's students. It could be good or evil. In Mir, I have both. There's one that actually is constantly stealing students from the other college. Um, they are often connected to inns and taverns, places they could perform, or some kind of amphitheater or theater. You could have them make the musical instruments. You could tie them quite into the economy around bards and musicians, and so there's a lot there you could play with. You could even have the characters, attend bard college in the off time, right, downtime.
Right.
Then there's monk brotherhoods, which are usually lawful. Monks are usually kind of lawful, and they follow a code. They are mostly brotherhood, obviously, is alluding to that being a group of men. You could change it. I don't know. I guess I do have some monk groups that don't aren't entirely men, but most of them are in Mir. They're usually secretive, keep to themselves. They could be again good, neutral, evil. Really, you could have anything. They're usually a loyal group, organized. There's different kinds of monks, right? Different kinds of subclasses. So you could base the guild around a certain subclass. They're they could also be artisans, or I have like one group of monks who brew mead, and I have
Nice.
another group who run an orphanage. So they often have other tasks that they do other than just meditating and going on adventures. They usually have rituals and meditations involved in their practice. Oh, I have another group in on Zog who their main task is looking after this library, the most important library
Right.
in Zog, actually in all of Mir, really. So monks really have lots of different options there. And it could be that often they are not that far from settlements, but you could have one way out in the wilderness. And we have both of those sort of options in Mir. And cults very popular in D&D, have been from the beginning, and always secretive. Usually their lair is hidden. Again, I made a version of a cult leader in Monsters of the City,
Right.
and they often have magic. Sometimes they're a warrior. Demon and devil worshippers, those are very common cultists. We also have cultists in Mir who worship a lizard, like a snake god, a bunch of lizard men who are working with humans as well. But they could worship some strange creature. They could even worship something like a beholder, um, even an idea. They could be a cult. There's one crazy cult. This might sound familiar. In the city of Rivenhelm, they are called the Outraged, and if people don't follow their beliefs, they rage against them, and they are a very uneducated group who seem to not understand exactly the political structure and what's right and wrong. Sometimes they support terrorists. I don't know. This might sound familiar at this point.
I'm just. Sounds very familiar. Sounds
Yes.
very familiar.
So cults are something most people probably have heard about these days.
Yeah.
There's also druid circles. So a group of druids always in the wilderness. Again, they could be of any alignment. They guard the wilderness area, and they're often allied with the forest creatures, the beasts, and the fae that are there. So druid circles are pretty cool to have around. Again, they could be working with the party or against the party.
Yeah, kind of like in Harry Potter, the dark. Is it called the Dark Forest? Where whatever that forest is called. Yeah, there. So they went there and they encountered a variety of different creatures. That definitely some were like, "We're going to eat you," and some other ones were like, "Yeah, I don't trust you, but you know what? Yeah, okay, fine. We'll do something with you right now, but later on we
Right.
might kick your ass." So yeah, those kinds of. I specifically, I guess, in Harry Potter, those are primarily Fae, aren't they not?
Yeah, there's a lot of fae type creatures in there. There's also werewolves in the Forbidden Forest. And yeah, and you can also connect these druid circles to the actual subclass circles like Circle of the Moon and the other many subclasses they've made. And another one would be dwarf clans. So this is basically their families, their extended families. They're lawful, loyal, strong traditions. Again, they're usually good, but it's possible they could be evil or neutral.
Right.
And we have a lot of details about dwarf clans in the world of Mir. There are also many kinds of gangs, but usually I only mention the larger ones. There's the Wild Gang, this big gang of halflings in the city of Wild in the world of Mir. There's also smaller ones. I don't usually mention the smaller ones that much, just a
Right.
handful of people, but I might there's a small note of those here and there in Mir. And then the larger ones are mentioned in the book. And also I should mention, we have a Factions of Mir 72-page book PDF. We'll probably put that on the DMs Guild and our website later, but right now it's just gone out to the Kickstarter backers who ordered it. Yeah, and
Right.
it gives you more detail about the factions that are in the main book, and it's packed with factions and details. Basically, like almost many of the members they have names as well. We name them, and
Yeah.
we do a class and an alignment, and so there are also guilds. These are very common factions in fantasy settings. We mentioned the Thieves Guild. This could be quite big, quite small. It could really control a whole city even. They're often lawful evil because they have a code that they live by and they're organized. They usually have a powerful leader. That leader doesn't have to be a rogue. You could change things up and have them be a spellcaster or a monk or yeah, fighter would be a common leader too. But the composition of this guild would be rogues, potentially assassins, thieves, smugglers. They always have protection for their headquarters, so they could hire thugs or many different kinds of creatures to be the guards for their headquarters. They often have a vault and a place where they store the treasure that they've stolen,
Yeah.
and they often make alliances with other groups, and sometimes they have infiltrated the city's government.
That's actually important that you brought that up because there are definitely elements where you could have situations where a particular guild, I don't know, has struck up a deal with pirates, or they've struck up a deal with a different cult or something to that effect, where that would affect what parties could do. Like, oh well, our task is to do that, but oh geez, they've aligned with those guys who are really scary. So these kinds of situations are kind of fun to play with because you could have these deals being All right, hey, we really like each other. Right on. Yeah, we'll totally back you. No worries. Or it could be yeah, well, you control the docks, we control the rest of this town, and fine, we'll work with you right now. And the party could totally, you know, put a kibosh on a lot of that in different ways. Oh yeah, this guy, he's ripping you off. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Or it could be just an all out, you know, you could fight one guild and the other guild gets involved and then you run away.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense to know the motivations and connections because you can often play these factions off against each other,
Yeah,
and you might find a faction that's really helpful and you could ally with them and they could make or break your quest or help you with reaching your goals. So yeah, those alliances and connections, it does help a lot learning about them. One I really like to put in a faction I really like are trading guilds, merchant guilds,
right.
because it helps makes the world make sense of how the economy runs, what kind of resources are available, and sometimes these guilds are good, sometimes they're evil. They usually have like a fleet of wagons or ships that they use to transport their goods. They often have many mounts, um, often guards, like armed guards to protect their goods. Their leaders sometimes are a warrior or a merchant, and then they often can be, they're often owned by a noble family. Like they have to be funded somehow.
Yeah,
So sometimes the people who fund them don't have much to do with their day-to-day operations. So that's an interesting thing. You could find out, oh, this noble actually is the one who's funding this evil trading guild.
of
And
course.
so, yeah, so we have those varied kinds of trading guilds in Mir. There's some that are allied with evil governments, and there's one that actually just rules the entire kingdom. There's actually no government. It's just this one trading guild has taken over, and they just run the show. All the city guards are, on their payroll. Um, they have an armed force that can fight against other kingdoms. They're that big. They control the whole kingdom.
Yeah. That is actually I've always wanted to start a war in a
Well,
game. Oh yeah, these characters, yeah, we should totally let them know that they're, stealing their wagon line every other shipment, and it's not really the people that are being accused of it, it's actually them.
right.
That
Yeah,
kind of
well,
thing.
those convoys are so much fun. I mean, there are so many Western stories about the wagon train getting robbed, right? And
Yep.
the train robbery. And it's so much fun because you could have the players they could be along, you know, protecting the caravan, convoy of wagons. You could have them try to steal something from the convoy. You could have the convoy attacked and they have to protect them. Um, there's so many ways you can use that in a story. That's why there's so many stories about it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think half the Western stories are about wagons, going from one place to another. And Firefly, that's like, a lot of the stories in Firefly.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
So, and there's
Exactly.
sort of like a small version of a trading guild, right? Or a gang. So
Yeah.
another one are fighters guilds, a group of warriors, sort of expert warriors. Some again, they could be different alignments. One example of one is in the Skyrim game. The companions are a fighters guild,
Yep.
and so we have one of those in Mir. Um, but that's a nice addition. Basically, having a guild for any of the classes is an interesting idea. The way they train and get skills, and so you could even have your players go there to train. You know,
Yeah.
um, Another common one for factions is knighthoods. So lawful, organized, usually good and honorable, but not always. Um, Usually male, but not always. I do have one all female knighthood actually in the World of Mir. And that one is cool because the leader is kind of lives a double life. And so people don't know what she's really up to. Knighthoods are obviously filled with knights. These elite warriors usually have mounts, often war horses, so better armed mounts, and they often have many traditions. And we have numerous knighthoods in Mir. I would guess there's at least 7, maybe more.
Yeah.
All right, then we have pirates who are very similar to bandits, basically another group of criminals. Um, they are very common in the fantasy story. A great group of villains to have, partially because they're so mobile, right? It's much easier to travel around on the water than by land. A lot faster for them to get around, and they can really harass your players in many ways. I've often had pirates in the story. You've got a lot of great role playing options with pirates. You could have very serious, very silly. You can have the drunken pirate stereotype. Um, yeah, the leader could be the traditional warrior, but it could be a spellcaster. That would be cool.
That is actually, oh, I just all these different things about actually, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna hold off on that because there's something I want to say about this. Sorry,
Okay.
keep going.
Yeah, just a few more examples. So another one would be the Wizard Council. So a group of wizards. Again, this could be very powerful, could control like a whole world, could be just a small town. Um, there's even a form of government in fantasy stories called a mageocracy, which means a government run by wizards. Um, they're usually powerful wizards, and it can really vary in alignment. You could have a very good wizard council. You could have one like it's very apathetic and neutral, or you could have a very evil one. And
Yeah.
we have a few versions of that in the world of Mir. Then there's sort of extra factions that don't always fit into these other definitions. Like I have a time travelers faction, I have an evil dwarf faction. The Drow, I basically consider a faction because they're sort of like a faction within the elf race. And then another thing I add in to factions, which I've put in the factions book for Mir, are notable families. So they're usually nobles, but not always. Um, they're influential families. Often they control a faction or they fund it secretly or overtly. They often have good connections, as we mentioned before, about having a connection to the government. So I like including families. So I've included a lot of those in our factions book.
Yeah, because the thing I was going to say earlier was I was reminded by a character, a tiefling, I think that I played, that had a noble background and was basically kept in a tower by the wealthy family and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
And you actually took that and you said that my family was I've forgotten exactly what they had done. It's been a while, but they were basically involved in the main storyline in a minor way, because I think it was something that we did in the fifth session or something that you were like, oh wait a minute, wouldn't it be cool if, and then suddenly my character's background changed to a certain to a point where it was like I think another situation where the parents showed up and this kind of thing, and I found out things about my family that I didn't realize and stuff like that. So that was actually so that kind of all these kinds of things again can make your could really make that collaborative storytelling sort of shine because ideas actually we're talking about some characters that are going to be in this new campaign shortly, and the other players had some ideas about because I was sort of established in my character. I kind of knew what I was doing. Then he's like, hey, let's do this. I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. So we joined that together, and then he threw some suggestions. I'm like, yeah, that's actually really great. Let's do that. And then we told you, and you're like, oh, actually, how about this as well? And it kind of really brought these characters sort of out of the sheet, as it were, to allow a lot of these things to sort of come to life and how these characters can be played. And there's definitely going to be actually, I think more than one faction is going to be involved in the storyline that these two characters have gone through, and it's kind of without these kinds of elements to storytelling, cults and clans and gangs and families and things, kind of it just gives you all this life you can actually play with, and I hope that you as the individual running the game kind of went, oh yeah, okay, there's actually I've got this idea for where I want the story to go, but these guys are actually kind of cool, so maybe we could add these elements into it and make it more fun for the other players at the table who don't know what the backgrounds are, and can either choose to ignore them, choose to accept them, or choose to kind of dig in and be like, hey, what, so you guys are what, you came from where, and that kind of thing. So it's that nice level of being at a table with other human beings in the flesh, where you can actually, through gameplay, get to know them and get to sort of encourage other, yourself to want to know more about their characters and where their characters came from, and it sort of builds that companionship, because the one thing that irritates me about the table is that there's always this assumption that all the characters are going to suddenly be these heroes that come out of nowhere and are going to do some sort of heroic deeds. It's like, well, yeah, they are going to do that, but not day one. You've met at a tavern, you've met at the base of a tree, you've met in on a battlefield, and you have to use those kinds of experiences to really build those relationships between the characters. And yeah, sorry, I just kind of was excited about that because it sparked off the whole idea that I don't think any character can escape encountering any group or being a member of a group right out of the crib, kind of thing. So anyway, there's all kinds of ways to play it, and I love it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's really fun taking characters' backgrounds and merging that with the story. And it adds new elements to the story, as you said. And often that has to do in some ways with factions. So that's what's happening now as we start this new campaign and people give new ideas about what their background could be, where their family could be from, where they're from. And then that, the world's already created, not every part of it, but a lot of it, so that if you decide that you're from somewhere, well, that means something with the factions that are there.
Yeah.
And, in your case, your character is fleeing one group. And, it can really add to the whole story having many different layers of what's going on. They might not come to fruition right away in terms of some kind of element in the story. It might take a while, but eventually, it could work its way in. So yeah, I always find it fascinating because you don't know what the players are bringing. And it's interesting sometimes as a player, I think, not to give all your backstory away. We usually start every
Yes.
night. We start every night by the player saying a little bit about their character and who they are. Um, Often because we don't always have the exact same players at the table, but it's also a nice summary of where we are. And I think it's nice to not have everything out in the open. And you're going to need to tell your DM so that they can, that potentially can help them add more to the story. But I don't think you need to tell all the other players right away everything about your character.
Well, no, exactly, and this is what I mean about just that. It adds to that naturalistic kind of way of getting to know players that you've never met before. Say it's the first time you played together, because you can introduce yourself literally through the gameplay. It's like, well, I'm going to play this character, and this is how I like to roll, and then you turn around, it's like, hey, buddy, you want to ride? You want to ride home? That kind of stuff, and those kinds of. I think just all of these elements together are creating an incredibly powerful method of in-game but also out of game, if that makes sense, because there's all these ways of I've gotten to know people really, really well just because their gameplay was fascinating to me. It's like how they did the role play, how they came up with their characters, how they describe what's going on. Because a lot of the time it's like, okay, I'm gonna hit it with my sword. All right. They roll some dice. Where other players are like, okay, well, I'm gonna take my sword. And I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna be stabbing directly at, body part X, because my intent is I don't want to kill them, but I want to injure them, for example, and those kinds of things. Where a lot of players, especially new players, don't really delve in that deep into explaining what their character looks like, explaining what their mannerisms are, explaining what, because a lot of them at the very beginning don't go beyond, well, I'm a fighter and I have this background. It's like, okay, well, what does your character look like? What kind of things do you like to do? And because characters, hey, they have hobbies, they have interests, they have things that you can come up with on the spot if you really want to. And I think that people, through a character with a background with a clan of some kind or with a gang of some kind, can actually lean into that and actually encourage that player to go, oh, well, I'm a member of the Sun Kings, and we really, really don't like, this, I don't know, scent, and we're going to decimate the scent from the planet, these kinds of things. And it could be ridiculous, it could be serious, it could be funny, it could be silly, like characters having families, noble families that have run a chain of restaurants. Like on the surface, that's cool, but then the DM goes, you know what? Your character has to like open a chain restaurant or has to open a location, because if they don't, they're out of the will or something. That could be a side quest for the characters to all help each other do, and can be funny where you end up blowing up a bar. But anyway, that'll never get old for me.
Yeah, it's a good point. You can definitely be inspired by other players about what, how they create their character and how they play their character. And when they're creating it, a lot of times that can have to do with a faction, right? Some kind of group. And like you said, it's hard to get away. And if you think about the real world, it's also hard to get away from factions.
Yeah.
It can be in your school, right? There's basically factions in schools and universities and neighborhoods, and it's very human to have these small groups and tribes, and yeah.
It's great stuff. I mean, it's one of these things that we talk about once in a while, where we've talked about different races, we've talked about different classes, we've talked about all kinds of things at the table. But this is one of those little features that really excites me, where I can look at a faction, or I can look at a guild, or I can look at some sort of collection of individuals, and instantly you kind of have these ideas like, okay, well, here's how I can improve my character. I can help improve the party. I can help improve the story, by adding suggestions to the table, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, or how about we try it this way, and you could, and not to mention, these guilds can be resources where if you are a member of a faction of some kind, your character is, and the party's been tasked with something, it's like, oh, actually, you know what? I can ask Barry. Who's Barry? Oh, Barry's this guy that I know from, yeah, I'm going to go. He's got the ladders. I'm pretty sure he's got a bunch of ladders we could use for getting over the wall or whatever it is. But again, it's just one of those things that you kind of learn over time, that you have resources, you have the ability for the party to deal with situations where you have factions, say you are trying to play two factions against each other, and it's like, well, hey, faction A, I need to do this, and if you need some help with faction B, I mean, okay, but that's the deal, and that kind of thing. And I don't know, I just find at the table that a lot of these opportunities are missed, because the players are so focused on the rules of the game, they lose a bit of the role-playing side of it, and don't focus on the dice so much. It's important, but the role-playing aspect is kind of important because it's kind of in the name, kind of the subtitle of Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that subtitle kind of gets a little ignored a bit. But that's just my experience, and I'm guilty of doing it myself. So I always have to remind myself, and which is why I bring it up every other episode, that these kinds of things are really uh, they're key elements to the whole thing. So
Right. Yeah, I guess the last thing I would say too is that you don't need to have too many of them. These are examples from a whole world. I
exactly,
think you can have too many, and I think some stories fall apart because there's too many groups, there's too many characters, there's too much stuff going
yeah.
on. And if you look a lot of good stories, they're usually clearer. There's not that many factions, there's not that many different characters. So I think to have a few, and it depends, like a town, like a village or a town, you might not have any. You might have one. A city,
Yeah.
you're going to have more, but I think you don't, again, I think you don't want to have too much. I think it can get carried away, and they can lose their uniqueness in some way if you're having too many of them.
No, I agree, and it's one of those things where um, less is more. It's if you go to a completely different region, so say for example your party gets onto a boat and it's like, okay, we're gonna be traveling to this island or that other continent, or we're gonna go around the continent to this other part of the thing, and your adventure, that's where you have to go. That's where elements can be introduced for additional factions, because it just makes sense that I don't know, the gang where you've encountered 5 times over the last couple sessions doesn't have a presence in another place. So there's a different gang there, or there's a different controlling party, and that's where you could introduce additional things into an adventure. But they're not going to. You're right. They're not going to be everywhere, and they're not going to be that many of them because resources are finite, and they're going to be competing anyway. You might run into, say, I don't know, uh, a guild that is running a trading thing where you might encounter them in one part of the world. You guys travel to another part of the world, and oh hey, they're here too. Well, yeah, they've got another office because they bring they bring goods here, so that makes total sense, and it makes you could add it into the story or not. It could just be familiar, and you could go, oh yeah, we've dealt with them in city X. Now they're in township Y, and that's kind of cool. But anyway,
And
I
why
guess
did
I'm
the
just
DM name a settlement X and one Y?
exactly. Come on, man, be more creative. What's going on? There's an episode I'm sure here where we've talked about naming things. If not, we should do one. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's all of these little pieces that really make the whole world work, and yeah, less is more. Pick and choose, and don't overwhelm the party, because or have the party overwhelm the DM, because that is just like, guys, okay, look, I know you've got 400 friends, but please, can we only have like 3?
Right.
But anyway, there you are. So that's everybody. Are factions within the world of Mir specifically, but in Dungeons and Dragons as a whole. There's all kinds of different elements that we talk about often, or I talk about off and on, about how you can actually have a better time at the table, and you can have a better time in an adventure, because there's no one way to do things, and don't ever, ever, ever forget that it's just a game, because we're supposed to be having fun doing this, are we not? I have fun doing
I
this. I
heard
have
that's
fun playing
the
the
idea.
game.
Yeah. That's what I hear.
Oh, it's so weird. But we'll see you all next time. Thank you all for watching and or listening. And don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube channel. And of course, everything that we talk about, if there's any important links, they'll be down below. And of course, if you're confused and you're just like, hey, I don't know what to do, you can always go to Cawood Publishing at theworldofmere.com, because that's where you'll find it all. And of course, you can find every important link ever created by the World of Mir over there as well. I'm going to shut up now because we've been talking for a while. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Later.